My name is Cashin Vance, and for 8 years I wasn't really living, I was just a human ATM. Every day was a grind, juggling 4 jobs to pay off my parents' mounting debts. I woke up at 5 in the morning to help an elderly neighbor, then worked as a janitor, delivered food at night, and fixed computers after midnight. My health suffered, my body ached constantly, and any hope for a future of my own felt like a distant dream. I never complained, after all, I was the son, and my parents, Roland and Fiona, always reminded me that it was my duty to keep them afloat. Then one day, everything I thought I knew about loyalty and family shattered. I was scrolling through social media and saw a photo of my parents in a lavish Las Vegas suite, champagne in hand, grinning like kings. My stomach sank as the caption revealed the truth. They had won $3 million in the state lottery. My heart raced, hoping it was some cruel joke. I called them immediately, but no one picked up. Days passed. They didn't call, they didn't write, they didn't even acknowledge me. They had left me to handle all the bills, all the stress, all the sacrifices I'd made for them, while they celebrated their sudden fortune like strangers. I felt a mix of anger, disbelief, and deep, aching betrayal. Every memory of late nights at work, of skipping meals, of exhaustion, it all seemed wasted. I had built my life around keeping my family afloat, and the moment they had a choice, they abandoned me. That empty betrayal left a hollow place in me I didn't know how to fill. In the midst of this despair, there was one unexpected anchor. Alistair Croft, a reclusive billionaire who I cared for as part of my caregiving job. Even as I was collapsing under the weight of exhaustion and debt, he noticed me. While I lay in a hospital bed, alone and broken, he called daily, listened, and offered genuine kindness. For the first time, someone saw me, not just as a servant or a son who owed money, but as a human being worthy of care and respect. Through his mentorship, I began to see that family isn't always blood. Loyalty, compassion, and integrity matter more than a name or inheritance. And it was this lesson that eventually led me from being the powerless son my parents exploited to someone who could take control of his life, and, in time, teach them the meaning of true responsibility. I share this story not for sympathy, but because betrayal can be transformed. Even when the people who should love you the most abandon you, the right guidance and courage can turn heartbreak into freedom, and eventually, a life they can never touch. For years, my life was a non-stop cycle of exhaustion. I woke up before sunrise every day to care for Alistair Croft, a recluse billionaire who depended on me for everything. From bathing him to preparing his meals, I gave every ounce of energy I had, leaving barely any time to eat or rest. By early afternoon, I switched to my second job, cleaning offices and hallways as a janitor, my muscles aching and my back screaming with every movement. When evening came, I jumped into my next role, delivering food across the city, rushing from door to door, battling traffic, fatigue, and the constant weight of responsibility pressing down on me. And late at night, I sat hunched over broken computers, fixing them for extra cash, my hands trembling from exhaustion and overwork. Through it all, my parents' voices echoed in my mind, a constant reminder of my supposed duty. "You're the son, it's your responsibility," they said, and I repeated it to myself as a mantra, even as my body started to fail. My hands shook as I lifted trays, my back throbbed as I scrubbed floors, and my chest ached when I ran from one task to another. Sleep was rare, meals were skipped, and any thought of rest or a normal life seemed impossible. I was running on sheer willpower, fear, and guilt, believing that every sacrifice was necessary to keep my family afloat. The mental strain was just as brutal as the physical pain. I constantly worried about missing a payment, letting a client down, or making a mistake that could spiral into disaster. My mind was always racing, a jumble of calculations, schedules, and debts, leaving little room for anything else. I felt trapped, like I was caught in a storm with no way out, my own life slipping through my fingers while I kept everyone else afloat. The pressure was unrelenting, and some nights I wondered if I would collapse entirely, worn out beyond repair. Despite all this, I kept going, pushing through pain and fatigue, hoping that someday it would all pay off. But deep down, I knew my efforts were only feeding a cycle of exploitation. My parents never thanked me, never offered support or understanding. Their demands were endless, their gratitude non-existent, and my own well-being was always secondary. The constant reminder that this was my duty, my obligation as their son, kept me moving, even when every muscle in my body screamed for relief. Looking back, those months were a blur of labor and pain, a relentless routine that left me hollow and frail. Every day felt like a battle between survival and breaking down entirely. I didn't just work to live. I worked to survive the expectations of people who never cared enough to see how exhausted I had become. That endless cycle of work, pain, and fear shaped me, building a resilience I didn't realize I had, even as it chipped away at my health and happiness. It was exhausting, it was brutal, and it was my reality. I remember the moment clearly. I was halfway through a delivery, balancing bags of food and fighting the heat, when my legs gave out completely. One second I was walking, the next I was on the pavement, my body refusing to cooperate. Everything went black, and the last thing I heard was the distant sound of car horns and someone shouting my name. When I came to, I was in a hospital bed, the white walls blinding and the steady beep of machines the only company I had. The doctors told me I had severe anemia and arrhythmia. My body had been running on empty for far too long, and it had finally collapsed. They said my organs were stressed, my heart was overworked, and my body needed rest, something I had ignored for years. As the reality sank in, I felt a wave of shame and disbelief. How had I let it get this far? I had always been the strong one, the one holding everything together, and now I was lying in a sterile room, fragile and alone. The hospital staff told me they had contacted my parents immediately. They explained that calls were made, messages left, even updates sent to them daily. I waited, hoping, maybe imagining, that they would rush to my side, that they would finally see the exhaustion and pain I had carried silently for so long. Days passed and nothing. No visits, no calls, not even a simple text. The silence was deafening. It was as if all the years of sacrifice, all the nights I stayed awake to cover their debts, had vanished into thin air. Then, after almost a week, my phone rang. It was my mother. My heart thumped, a mix of hope and fear. Maybe she had finally realized how serious it was, how close I had come to breaking completely. But her words shattered me. Handle the bills yourself. The loan interest is due at the end of the month. There was no warmth, no concern, no acknowledgement of the pain I had endured or the near collapse I had suffered. Just a cold reminder of responsibilities and money, as if my life had never mattered. That moment broke something inside me. I had always believed in family, in loyalty, in blood ties, even when my body and mind screamed for relief. I had assumed that if things ever went wrong, they would be there. But now I understood the truth. My parents had never cared. The people I had trusted completely had abandoned me in my weakest hour, leaving me to face the consequences alone. Lying back in that hospital bed, I felt a mix of sorrow, anger, and disbelief. I realized then that the life I had built around serving them, sacrificing myself for their comfort and stability, had been a one-way street. For the first time, I truly saw my parents not as protectors or guides, but as strangers who had no intention of showing up when it mattered most. That realization changed me, planting the first seed of resolve that would later define the rest of my life. While I lay in the hospital bed, beaten down and exhausted, the only light in my days came from an unexpected source, Alistair Croft, the reclusive billionaire I had cared for over the years. Even as he battled his own failing health, he took the time to call me every day. At first, his voice was quiet, cautious, but it carried a weight of understanding that no one else had ever offered. Unlike my parents, he didn't treat me as a servant or a burden. He treated me as a person. We began to talk for hours on the phone. At first, it was small talk, about the weather, about minor events in the house, or about his own health. But over time, the conversation deepened. One evening, unable to hold it in any longer, I shared the truth about my life. How I had worked myself to the bone for years, how my parents had left me to handle debts I had taken on for them, and how their betrayal had shattered me. Speaking it aloud was frightening, but I felt a strange relief, like finally admitting a truth that had been burning inside me for years. Alistair listened without judgment. He didn't offer empty words or pity. Instead, he reminded me that loyalty and respect are earned, not given by blood. He told me stories of people he had trusted, of mistakes he had seen in families and business, and how the people who abandoned you aren't always the ones who matter most. He said, "Blood doesn't make a family, Cashin. The people who stand by you, who respect you, who see you for who you are, that is your family." Those words struck me deeply. For so long, I had measured my worth by my parents' approval, thinking that my devotion was enough to earn their care. Now I saw that I had been wrong. Care and respect are given freely, not demanded, and I had spent years seeking them from the wrong people. Alistair's attention, his guidance, and his unwavering support became a lifeline. In a world where I had felt invisible, he made me feel seen. We started planning small things: how I could regain control of my life, how to rebuild my health, and eventually how to think about my future. He encouraged me to focus on my strength, not my obligations. For the first time in years, I began to imagine a life beyond exhaustion, a life where I wasn't defined by my parents' demands or my debts. Alistair became more than an employer. He became a mentor and a guide. His belief in me planted a seed of confidence that had been crushed under years of work and betrayal. Through his example, I learned that loyalty is earned and true support can come from unexpected places. In his presence, I discovered the courage to see myself as someone worthy of respect, care, and freedom. That bond changed the trajectory of my life, giving me hope and determination when I had none left. After leaving the hospital, I felt fragile but determined. I needed to face my parents, to talk about the debts I had carried for them for years. I picked up the phone and called my father, Roland. His voice came through, cheerful and loud, with laughter and clinking glasses in the background. He barely acknowledged me before ending the call abruptly, muttering something about being busy. My heart sank. I had hoped for at least a shred of concern, but it was clear they had moved on, leaving me behind. Later that day, I scrolled through social media and froze. My mother, Fiona, had posted a photo of their house filled with lights, balloons, and friends, everyone smiling and holding champagne. The caption read, "A new beginning. Thank you, universe." I felt a rush of anger and disbelief. The same people who had drained me of my time, energy, and health were celebrating life without a care for the sacrifices I had made. I couldn't just sit there. I drove to their house, my stomach heavy with a mix of dread and hope. As I approached, I could hear music, laughter, and the chatter of a large gathering. Inside, the scene was lavish, tables stacked with food, expensive decorations, and every corner bustling with celebration. I found my parents at the center, smiling and raising glasses, and I asked about the lottery, trying to keep my voice steady. They looked at me coldly and confirmed the news. They had won $3 million. Then, without hesitation, they told me, "We don't need your pocket change anymore." My throat tightened. I explained the debts I had carried for them, the late nights, the sacrifices, and the exhaustion. But instead of understanding or gratitude, they laughed at me. Their friends joined in, mocking the idea that I had done anything for them. I felt a wave of humiliation wash over me as I realized they were proud of their wealth and status, while publicly showing me as nothing more than a burden they no longer needed. They made it clear that I wasn't welcome, that my concerns were irrelevant. I stood there, trying to find words, but none came. They pushed me out of the house, the party noises behind me feeling like an echo of every hardship I had endured for them. I left their mansion with my head held high, but my heart heavy, knowing that the people I had once called family had abandoned every shred of care or responsibility. That day changed everything. The person I had spent years trying to please, the parents I had sacrificed for, had shown their true colors. The debts, the pain, and the loyalty meant nothing to them. Their lottery win wasn't just money. It was a confirmation that they had moved on without a thought for me, leaving me to face the consequences alone. In that moment, I realized I needed to stop depending on them, to find strength elsewhere, and to take control of my own life before it slipped away completely. A few days after the humiliating party, I felt a mix of dread and a faint hope that maybe, just maybe, my parents would show some remorse. I drove to their house, thinking I could talk to them, explain how much I had done for them, and maybe find some common ground. But as I pulled up, the first thing I saw was a bright sold sign planted firmly in the front yard. My stomach sank. The house was completely empty. The decorations, the laughter, the signs of their recent celebration, all gone. I stepped inside, half expecting someone to appear, to call my name, or even to scold me for coming. But the silence was complete. The emptiness echoed around me like a warning, a statement that they were gone for good. In the kitchen, I found a stack of papers spread across the bare floor. Bills, loan statements, and all the remaining debts, everything still in my name. On top of the pile was a small, folded note in my mother's handwriting. I hesitated before picking it up, my hands trembling as I read the words. "We're starting our life over. You're an adult, you can handle this. Don't try to find us." The message hit me like a punch to the chest. They weren't coming back. They weren't sorry. They weren't even pretending to care. All the years I had spent working myself to exhaustion, worrying about their finances, and sacrificing my own life for their comfort had ended with nothing but abandonment. The realization was crushing. I sank to the floor, staring at the bills, the note, the empty house, feeling a hollow emptiness settle in my chest. Every hope I had held for reconciliation, every thought that maybe they would finally see me, evaporated instantly. This was the moment I understood the full scope of their betrayal. They didn't just reject me. They erased me from their lives, leaving me to deal with the consequences alone. But amidst the despair, a strange sense of clarity began to emerge. The hopelessness slowly shifted into resolve. I realized that clinging to them, hoping they would change or feel guilt, would only keep me trapped in a cycle of pain. Their choices were theirs, and I couldn't control them. What I could control was myself, my actions, and the life I would build from this moment forward. I stood up, dusted myself off, and took a deep breath. The debt was still mine to manage, but my spirit, my decisions, and my future were mine as well. The loss of my parents' care and support was painful, but it also made room for something new. A life where I could finally make choices for myself, free from their selfishness and betrayal. Leaving the empty house behind, I felt a cold determination settle in. Their absence was permanent, but so was my chance to reclaim my life. I wouldn't let their abandonment define me. From that moment on, I resolved to survive, to grow, and to rise above the people who had turned their backs on me. It was the first step toward freedom, and I knew I had to take it alone. Alistair Croft passed away quietly in his sleep, leaving a world that had long ignored him. I received a call summoning me to his estate for the reading of his will. I felt a mix of sadness and nervous anticipation as I arrived, unsure of what awaited me. The moment I stepped into the grand room, I was met with cold stares and open hostility. Alistair's children, sharp and entitled, looked me over with obvious contempt. Their whispers filled the air, sharp with suspicion and resentment, and their glares made it clear they considered me an intruder in their father's life. The lawyer began reading the will. I listened in tense silence as Alistair's words were spoken aloud, a careful and deliberate explanation of his wishes. Then, the part that shook the room to its core, he had left me $12 million. I felt a strange mix of disbelief and solemn gratitude. It wasn't just money. It was freedom, security, and recognition from someone who had truly seen me, who had valued my loyalty and character when everyone else had ignored my suffering. The reaction from Alistair's children was immediate and explosive. Their faces twisted in anger and disbelief, voices raised as they accused me of cheating their father, of coercing him while he was weak, and of manipulating his decisions for my own gain. They called me names, questioned my integrity, and swore that they would sue me, ruin my reputation, and take everything away. Their fury was loud, chaotic, and relentless, filling the room with tension and hostility. I stood quietly, feeling the weight of their accusations, but refusing to respond with anger. Every insult, every demand to return the money, only reinforced the contrast between them and Alistair. They saw wealth as power and entitlement, while I had always viewed it as a responsibility, a tool to rebuild a life that had been stripped from me. I understood that their outrage came from selfishness, jealousy, and the shock of realizing that their father had chosen to honor someone outside his immediate family, someone he trusted and respected. Through the turmoil, I felt a deep sense of clarity. Alistair had not only given me financial freedom, but he had also affirmed that loyalty, honesty, and character mattered more than blood or status. He had chosen to reward years of dedication, sacrifice, and integrity, even in the face of skepticism from those who had never cared for him, or me. I left the estate that day knowing that the fight ahead would not be easy. Alistair's children would attempt every legal and personal tactic to challenge the will, to discredit me, and to intimidate me. But I also knew that I had the backing of the truth of Alistair's explicit intentions, and of my own integrity. Their anger, though loud and threatening, could not erase the recognition I had earned or the path Alistair had paved for my future. For the first time in years, I held something solid and real in my hands, a chance to live on my own terms, free from betrayal, fear, and dependence on those who had never truly valued me. The moment Alistair's will was revealed, the real battle began. His children were relentless. They launched a full-scale attack, both legally and publicly, determined to take the money away from me. Almost immediately, tabloids picked up their story. Headlines called me a con artist caregiver and questioned my integrity. My name was splashed across news sites and social media, twisted into stories I didn't recognize. People I had never met were quick to judge, to vilify me, and to assume I had manipulated Alistair for personal gain. The harassment didn't stop online. I received threatening messages, angry comments, and phone calls filled with accusations and insults. My reputation, carefully built over years of hard work, felt like it was being torn apart in real time. To make matters worse, my job became impossible to maintain. I was let go from work because employers didn't want to be associated with the negative attention, leaving me not only under attack, but also financially exposed. The stress was suffocating, and for a moment, I felt the walls of my life closing in, the weight of everyone's judgment pressing down like a physical force. Then came the lawsuits. Legal papers arrived at my door, demanding explanations, evidence, and of course, the return of the money. Their lawyers were aggressive, threatening to drag me through months, maybe years, of litigation. Even in person, I faced confrontations. Strangers accused me of wrongdoing, and I received clear warnings to give up the inheritance or face consequences. It felt like the world had turned against me, and every step forward was met with 1,000 obstacles. Through all the chaos, I had one thing that kept me grounded: a letter Alistair had given me shortly before his death. I kept it in my pocket, reading it whenever despair threatened to take over. The words were simple but powerful. This money is not a reward. It is the key to your freedom. Use it to live a life of decency, something your parents will never understand. Those sentences reminded me of why I had been given this opportunity and why I couldn't let the attacks define me. I held on to the truth of Alistair's intentions. He had seen me for who I truly was, and he had trusted me to handle this responsibility wisely. His faith in me became my shield against every smear, threat, and insult. I realized that none of the chaos could change the reality that I had done nothing wrong. The money was mine to use, not as a trophy, but as a tool to build a life on my own terms. Even when the legal battles seemed overwhelming, when the stress felt unbearable, and when I was tempted to retreat, I reminded myself of the promise in that letter. Every smear, every lawsuit, and every threat only reinforced the truth. I had earned my freedom, and no one could take that away as long as I stayed steady, honest, and focused on the life I was meant to build. In that storm, I learned that strength isn't about avoiding attacks. It's about standing firm and letting integrity guide you through the fire. The court battle was intense. Alistair's children were determined to take everything from me, throwing every argument and accusation they could at the judge. Their lawyers were skilled, relentless, and aggressive, but I wasn't alone. Alistair had left me more than money. He had left guidance in the form of a loyal lawyer who believed in his wishes and in my honesty. Together, we prepared carefully, gathering all the evidence that proved the legitimacy of his decision. When the trial began, tension filled the courtroom. Every comment from the opposing counsel felt like an attack on my character. Every smirk or whisper from Alistair's children felt personal. They painted me as manipulative, greedy, and unworthy, insisting I had coerced Alistair into leaving me the money. But we were ready. The lawyer presented a video Alistair had recorded while fully lucid, in which he explained clearly and calmly why he had chosen to leave me $12 million. In it, Alistair spoke of my loyalty, integrity, and care, making it impossible to claim manipulation. In addition to the video, the lawyer submitted Alistair's heartfelt letter. Every word reinforced the truth that the inheritance was a reward for years of devotion and honesty, not a product of deceit or coercion. The evidence was undeniable, thorough, and moving. I watched as the judge carefully reviewed every piece, noting the sincerity and clarity of Alistair's intentions. The room, which had been tense and hostile, grew quieter with each passing moment. Finally, the judge delivered the verdict. Alistair's children's case was dismissed entirely. Their accusations, their threats, and their legal maneuvers had failed. I felt a wave of relief, a mixture of exhaustion and quiet triumph washing over me. It wasn't the kind of victory that called for celebration or loud gloating. It was a calm, steady recognition that justice had been served and that I had been vindicated. After the ruling, there was a moment of silence. The opposing side was stunned, their fury and disbelief obvious, but I didn't respond with anger or revenge. I had no desire to humiliate or punish them further. All I wanted had been to honor Alistair's trust in me, to follow through on the promise I had made to him when he had believed in me more than anyone else ever had. Standing there, holding the sense of validation that came from the court's decision, I realized that this victory was about more than money. It was about acknowledgement, about truth being recognized, and about finally being free from the shadow of those who had doubted and mistreated me. I had survived betrayal, public attack, and threats, and I had done so with integrity intact. When asked to speak, I simply said, "I only ever wanted to keep my promise to him." Those words carried everything I felt: gratitude, relief, and the quiet pride of having stayed true to myself and to the man who had seen my worth. In that moment, I knew I could finally move forward, no longer weighed down by past injustices, ready to build a life defined by my choices and my values. 2 years had passed since the chaos over Alistair's will, and life had finally settled into a calm rhythm. I had used the inheritance wisely, paying off every debt that had once haunted me. No loan or unpaid bill remained to weigh me down, and I had even started my own small tech repair business. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine, built from hard work and careful planning, a space where I could thrive without fear or pressure. My days were busy but steady, and my nights peaceful for the first time in years. I had also built a personal life that felt healthy and fulfilling. I was in a relationship with someone who respected me, shared my values, and treated me as an equal. There was laughter, support, and warmth. Everything I had been denied for so long. For the first time, I realized what it meant to live without constant fear, obligation, and the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. One morning, as I was closing up the shop, a knock came at the door. I opened it to find my parents standing there, Roland and Fiona. Their clothes were worn, their faces anxious and desperate. The aura of arrogance and entitlement they once carried had vanished. They told me the lottery money was gone, lost in bad investments and reckless spending. Now they wanted me to take care of them, invoking family duty, as if nothing had changed. For a moment, I studied them quietly. There was no anger left in me, only a strange sense of pity. I thought about every late night, every sacrifice, every time I had pushed myself to exhaustion to keep them afloat. I remembered the betrayal, the public humiliation, the empty hospital bed, and the note on their empty kitchen floor. Those memories no longer fueled rage. They were reminders of the life I had left behind. I spoke calmly, deliberately, without a hint of aggression. "I stopped being your son the day you left me with those debt papers. You are strangers to me now." I could see the shock in their eyes, the realization that the son they had taken for granted had grown into a man who no longer depended on them. I closed the door behind them without looking back. For the first time, I felt the full weight of freedom. Their absence, their betrayal, their demands, they no longer controlled me. I turned toward my own life, my own family, and the quiet home I had built from the ruins of my past. The trust, love, and support I had found elsewhere were real, enduring, and entirely mine. Standing there, I understood that life doesn't demand forgiveness for the selfish or the careless. It demands action, resilience, and the courage to step away from those who would harm you. I had taken those lessons to heart. My parents were gone from my life in every meaningful way, but I had gained something far more valuable: a life of dignity, control, and peace that no one could ever tarnish. Do you think I did the right thing by cutting my parents out after everything? Or should I have tried to forgive them? I'm curious what you think. Comment below and subscribe for more stories like this.